special about Coach Hayes is that he cares for his players. And one good example of that is when he recruited me out of high school. And he recruited me to come to Ohio State University. He took me out to dinner to his favorite restaurant, the High Life. And I remember that evening, as he was recruiting me, he never mentioned hardly anything about football and me coming to Ohio State playing football. The whole time, he talked about an education and how important an education was. I remember going home that night talking with my father. My father asked me, you know, how'd the dinner go with Coach Hayes? And I told him, I said, Daddy, you know, I don't think Coach Hayes wants me to play football for him. He said, well, why is that? I said, he never mentioned anything about football. He said, well, what did he talk about? I said, the whole evening he talked about an education. And my father kind of looked at me kind of strange and said, well, don't you think he's worried about you as a person and not just someone that's going to get out on the field and run for 100 yards or score 2 or 3 touchdowns for him?
In recruiting, he invoked the image of his father as a guide. When asked who had the most influence on his life,
my dad. No doubt about it. He was a great man. And you know who else says that same thing? Arch Griffin. His dad has had more effect on him than anybody else. But my dad was a great educator. He made you do it. He was very disappointed if you didn't do it. And you could learn from him. Gee whiz, he seemed to know everything. That's terrible to brag about your dad that way, but it's true. He was just that good. And my mother was right behind him and helping him every way she could.
And what type of player did Woody Hayes look for?
He has to be team-oriented. Usually he comes from a good home. Comes from a home that has respected him as a youngster. And he's learned to have self-esteem because he was esteemed in that home. And we find that once a youngster learns self-esteem, he can pass it on to other people. You can't respect somebody else until you've learned to respect yourself. The two things that are always in a good home is, number one, the kid is wanted. He knows that long before he can toddle. Number two, there's discipline in that home, and discipline always implies disciples. He believes in those who took care of him and started to guide him. Those two things are always there, and I look for them. Now, not often, but sometimes we ran onto this youngster from this bad home or no home at all. He didn't get to choose that home. We must be aware of that. I'll take him and give him a double chance just for that very reason. If he's appeared to rise above those circumstances, I want him. I want to help him along. I can do it.
Always give 100%. He expected it from his coaches, he demanded it of his players, and gave it of himself.
Now, fellas, I cannot understand it. Who do you have to take? That's right. Who do you have to take? That man, did you take him?
I went out and put up
What?
I took my step.
You're only a senior. You made this mistake 15 times this fall. Now you get with it. Damn it, I'm tired of it. You lose us a ball game, and by God, I'll throw you off the squad. He's the guy, you gotta hit him. He was in there. It is a tough game. It's a grueling game. It isn't easy in any way. I never saw a man make a tackle with a smile on his face. It just is not that kind of a game.
He pushed his players, no doubt about that, but he pushed himself more. He would spend hours alone going over strategy and poring over films, looking for the edge that would give the Buckeyes an advantage over their opponent. It took enormous self-discipline, but he possessed an ego that sustained him.
All right, now, Rick Volley, look, if you catch the ball and fall. Now, you're not deep enough. You're not deep enough, and that's true of all you fullbacks. Now, get your depth right here to another 3 to 4 yards, and then you can catch the ball, and you've already made your first down. You guys sit here and don't learn anything. Yeah, you see what I mean now? Fullback, can you see what I mean? You're catching that ball right on your hip pocket, and you're turning clear around to catch it, and then you fall down. Outside of that, you do a great job.
He did, indeed, live to win.
Oh, you got to win. You got to play to win. Now, you're not going to win them all, but you're going to play and give everything you have to win. Do you play your player when he's hurt to win? Obviously, the answer there is no. You don't do that sort of thing. There's certain restrictions you have, certain rules that you just do not break. But when you live within those rules, it gives you a greater strength. And I like to feel that man upstairs is sort of cheering for you when you live right.
Woody Hayes gave new meaning to the word curmudgeon. Applied to him, it implied a crafty, crusty individualist. It was part of his image, an image he carefully nurtured. In the beginning, it amounted to no more than appearing in a short-sleeved shirt, no matter how bitterly cold the weather. But it progressed to throwing down his earphones, his glasses, his watch, then assailing officials and tearing up yard markers. Sometimes it was through frustration. More often, it was for effect. And it worked. He got national press and national attention.
Both of you off the field. Who is this? Who's the other one? Get off the field. Who's the other one? Who is the other one? Who was it? Wah? Shut up and get off. Were you in on it?
I've always been a high-strung individual. Maybe that's my artistic temperament tearing loose, because I've never had much artistic ability one way or the other. But I shouldn't do that. I can always console myself with the thought that at least I put the worst side before everybody. I wish everything brought as much credit and as much teamwork and loyalty and just outright good, honest fun to the university as football did. Yeah, I wish everything did that. We'd have a much more wholesome attitude toward a lot of things around this university if they did what football does. Now, I say that publicly, and of course, a lot of people resent that, but I don't much care.
Of all the charges leveled at Woody Hayes, prejudice was never one of them. He was one of the first to bring black players and coaches onto the squad.
First of all, it was a great opportunity for me to get to play here. It'd been a dream for a long time to come to Ohio State and play. As I was mentioning before, I come from a predominantly Caucasian town, and there's a lot of people who said, oh, he can't make it, you know, because he's going to be just like his father. My father had a mental illness, and because of that and because I was black, they thought, well, he's going to be a nobody. And they told me to go to a small school, Joe, you know, go to a small school where you can be the big fish in the little pond. And I said, well, hey, you know, I have enough self-respect that I'm going to go to a school that's large enough to give me the competition that I want on my, you know, the level that I think I can compete on.
Good job, Bo.
Loyalty to his players always came first. In his 28-year career, no one ever heard him publicly lay the blame of defeat on his players or coaches.
Exactly what we want.
During the riots that were tearing apart the university in the late 60s, his was one of the few voices that won the respect of the student body. That respect grew with his annual visits to Vietnam. No Bob Hope, he still was awarded a commendation of appreciation by the Navy. A decade later, they again showed their appreciation for his contribution to morale by naming a naval recruit company for him. As usual, he gave a pep talk.
The victory at Midway was the greatest underdog victory that was ever fought. There were men lost in that battle who deliberately gave their lives so that we could get in on those carriers, and in 6 minutes, the war in the Pacific was turned around. 6 minutes! That's greater than any football game was ever played.
In another place, in another time, a few moments would change the course of his life. His fierce desire to win and his fiery temper did not serve him well at the 1978 Gator Bowl. An intercepted pass cost him a victory and his job. Characteristically, Woody never did apologize for the incident, but he did excuse himself.
I'm too darn smart to be bitter. That's why I'm still going. Anytime you have bitterness or hatred, you're destroying yourself. You can be sure of it. You're going to destroy yourself because you're going to be so emotional, you're going to be so inaccurate in your decisions and all that sort of thing that you're going to end up destroying yourself. You can't do it.
But even if he didn't apologize for his actions, he did at least for their effect.
I feel very sorry for it because of the wonderful people it's affected. My coaches, 5 of whom were without jobs, and several graduate students. Men through no problems of their own because they work 14 to 16 hours a day, 7 days a week, enormously loyal, and yet they do not have a job. So we've got to help them get a job. We've got to do that.
As the Gator Bowl closed his coaching career, it opened an opportunity for a new one, and the ever-optimistic coach seized it.
Defeat is a great cleanser.